Order, please. We will commence with the daily routine. Presenting and reading petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table the report of the Public Trustee for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2008.
The report is tabled. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notices of motion. The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future date. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas today marks the opening of the National Energy Efficiency Conference hosted by the province of Nova Scotia, and whereas our Energy and Environment Minister and I will be joined by Premier Floyd Rowland of the Northwest Territories and provincial ministers and delegates responsible for energy efficiency, and whereas the conference will highlight the best programs and practices in energy efficiency and conservation from all provinces and territories. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House welcome delegates from across the country who have come here to share positive ideas that will be of benefit to all Canadians and our planet. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas untreated chronic pain may rob people of their quality of life, affecting their physical, social, psychological, and spiritual well-being. And whereas all people deserve the most effective and appropriate treatment of pain. And whereas the Chronic Pain Association of Canada is a grassroots organization offering education, practical information, practical support, and information to those suffering with chronic pain. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize November 2nd to November 8th, 2008 as Pain Awareness Week in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the October Power of Green Conference brought together nearly 400 delegates and some of the world's top experts to discuss the business case for sustainability and making small changes that have a positive impact on the bottom line, and whereas creating environmental sustainability and expanding Nova Scotia's economy is key to the future of the province, and whereas sustainable prosperity means seizing today's opportunities without compromising tomorrow, while working together for a strong, competitive economy, a healthy environment, and vibrant, thriving communities. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House extend its congratulations to the staff of Nova Scotia Economic Development on this innovative and very successful conference. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Community Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the L'Arche organization provides quality and supportive residential and vocational training and day programs to adults with disabilities, and whereas L'Arche has been a valued partner in the province's long-term strategy for services for persons with disabilities, and whereas the L'Arche organization provides services in 3 community homes in Wolfville, Antigonish, and Orangedale, and has recently broken ground on the 4th community home in Halifax. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House commend the L'Arche organization and their many staff and volunteers for their dedication and passion in supporting Nova Scotians with disabilities and congratulate them on building a new community home in Halifax. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas each fall, rankings of grant and research intensity are compiled by Research InfoSource to identify the top 50 research universities in Canada. And whereas Dalhousie University, St. Mary's University, St. Francis Xavier University, Acadia University, and Nova Scotia Agricultural College are 5 of the province's 11 universities that have ranked on this national list for 2008. And whereas when combined, these 5 institutions will receive $145.8 million in research funding, allowing innovation and exploration to continue to be carried out in Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of the House congratulate these 5 universities for being identified among Canada's top research universities, helping solidify Nova Scotia's reputation as Canada's education province. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Jim Reid of Green Solutions is helping companies balance environmental and social strategies within a corporate social responsibility framework. And whereas Green Solutions is helping companies do the right thing by providing environmentally sensitive and socially responsible solutions to challenges they face. And whereas Mr. Reid's presentation at the Green Power Hour in September in Bridgewater is proof that one person can inspire environmental change while helping to build a prosperous economy. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House join the people of Nova Scotia in congratulating Jim Reid of Green Solutions for helping businesses all over Canada do the right thing from an environmental, economic and social perspective. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Porters Lake Echo Fire was the largest wildland-urban interface forest fire in Nova Scotia's history, and whereas 2 firefighters displayed innovative and strong leadership, sharing the demanding and critical role of incident commander in charge of gaining control of and extinguishing the blaze. And whereas Eric Pick and Mark Saywood led the successful efforts that saved these threatened communities, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House thank these men for their bravery and dedication to our province. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a shared common goal of the School of Education at Acadia University and the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board is to enrich the overall quality of education offered to students in our public school system. And whereas on October 28, 2008, the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board and the School of Education at Acadia University signed Principles of Cooperation and Understanding. And whereas these principles outline opportunities to enhance the development of pre-service teachers and the professional growth of existing professors, teachers, and administrators, therefore be it resolved, all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Acadia University and the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board for establishing the first official partnership between a school board and a university faculty in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Cool Truro program challenges community members and businesses to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption. And whereas members of the Living Earth Council, a local grassroots volunteer group who helped develop the program, are showcasing their leadership in the area of climate change. And whereas their presentation at the Green Power Hour inspired the residents of Truro to get involved and do their part, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House join the people of Nova Scotia in congratulating the residents of Truro Cool for pledging to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce energy consumption. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice on a future day shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas over 80% of cardiac arrests happen at home in the presence of a family member, and whereas the CPR Anytime Kit...
Order, please. The chatter is a little high. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Whereas the CPR Anytime Kit is a 22-minute training program designed to help families and friends learn the core CPR skills in their own houses. And whereas Nova Scotians can learn to give CPR to a child or adult by using the Mini Learning Mannequin, a CPR skills DVD, and the information included in the kit. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize the Nova Scotia Heart and Stroke Foundation for its work to encourage Nova Scotians to use this research-proven method that is as effective as traditional class in teaching core CPR skills. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. If I may do an introduction before I introduce the bills. May I do an introduction?
Please do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the gallery today, we have a number of people from the Nova Scotia Association of Counselling Therapists. I'm only going to single out two of them. There's a whole bunch of them there, but I do want to single out Marion McDonald, who is the chair of the Nova Scotia Association of Counselling Therapists. Thank you for being with us today. And an older school teacher of mine, Wendell Dion, not only a school teacher, but a good family friend, and I welcome them here to the House of Assembly here today. Mr. Speaker, I request big leave to introduce an act entitled An Act Respecting the Practice of Counseling Therapists.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act Respecting the Practice of Counselling Therapists.
Bill number 201, an act respecting the practice of counseling therapists.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable the Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of my colleague, the member for Halifax Citadel, I beg leave to introduce an act to amend Chapter 260 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Liquor Control Act.
Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 260 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Liquor Control Act.
Bill number 202, an act to amend Chapter 260 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Liquor Control Act.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 208 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Hospitals Act.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 208 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Hospitals Act.
Bill number 203, an act to amend Chapter 208 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Hospitals Act.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. The Honourable, the Minister of Health.
Thank you. It seems like Health Day. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Enable the Transfer of Lands Necessary for the Expansion of the Queen Elizabeth II Health Sciences Centre. There we go.
The honourable member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Enable the Transfer of Lands Necessary for the Expansion of the Queen Elizabeth II Health Sciences Centre.
Bill number 204, an act to enable the transfer of lands necessary for the expansion of the Queen Elizabeth II Health Sciences Centre.
Order that this bill be read for a second time on a future day. Notices of motion. The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas health, education, and social services are three most significant areas of provincial jurisdiction.
Order, please. The chatter is too loud. The Honourable, the Minister, the Leader of the Opposition.
Whereas health, education, and social services are three most significant areas of provincial jurisdiction and account for more than 70% of provincial spending. And whereas one step Canada took to avoid a return to the conditions of the Great Depression was the establishment of the Federal Equalization Program. And whereas equalization was confirmed when a previous generation of leaders added it to the Constitution, stating that each province should be enabled to provide equivalent services. Therefore, be it resolved that the House respectfully reminds the Federal Finance Minister that for many Canadians, equalization is the most important federal transfer payment in support of health, education, and basic community services. And, Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. I would just remind all members of the House and visitors alike to please shut off your cell phones. The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition. The Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas John Graham McGuinness, a retired educator and municipal politician, passed away early this morning in his home in Victoria County. Whereas John Graham has served the people of Victoria County on municipal council since November 1987 and was recently elected warden. And whereas John Graham's passion for politics and community was also evident in his long-term involvement with the Nova Scotia Liberal Party. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly recognize the life and contribution of John Graham McGuinness and extend to his family our most sincere condolences. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas, unlike most Canadians, the people of Quebec are hoping February will be cold enough to freeze the bay. And whereas the organisers of the Silver Dart Centennial celebrations are hoping to recreate the 800-metre historic flight of J.A. Douglas McCurdy on February 23, 1909, across the frozen Quebec Bay, and whereas the bulk of the celebration planned will take place between the 20th and 24th of February, with additional days set aside throughout the year, and organisers are excited about a group of aficionados in Ontario that are working on a full-scale replica of the Silver Dart to be used in the official reenactment. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House send best wishes to the village of Quebec and the organisers of the Silver Dart Centennial celebrations and the big role that a small town played in aviation history. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Shipbuilding Association of Canada, the Marine Workers Federation, and many others in the shipbuilding and marine supply industries have proposed how to ensure that Canada can provide the ships it needs in a timely manner. And whereas Navy, Coast Guard, and Arctic sovereignty requirements call for Canada to replace, improve, and service the vessels on which this country relies. And whereas Canada should not rely on highly subsidized shipyards in other countries for a key element of its marine defense. Therefore, be it resolved that this House urges the federal government to work with shipbuilding and marine supply industries on a plan for the investment and recapitalization which will ensure that Canada's highly skilled shipbuilders are consistently employed to meet Canada's marine defense requirements. And Mr. Speaker, I would request passage without waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the member from Cape Breton South is enjoying his 30th year in public office, and whereas the member's 15 years in municipal politics earned him the title as the longest-serving mayor of Sydney.
Order, please. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the member from Cape Breton South is enjoying his 30th year in public office, and whereas the member's 15-year career in municipal politics earned him the title as the longest-serving mayor of Sydney, and whereas the member from Cape Breton South has served our province as a cabinet minister and provided strong representation for the people of his riding for the past 15 years, therefore be it resolved that the House of Assembly recognize the 10 consecutive electoral victories of the member from Cape Breton South and his long-standing commitment to the people of this province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Immigration on an introduction.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a great privilege to welcome an old friend back in the House this evening. And in that vein of which we were just talking about, Councillor Rankin, District 22 HRM, I think he's, let's see now, 4 terms with HRM consecutive. This was his 4th win. And I believe with the county a couple of terms before that. So he's been around for a while himself and represents his district with the great vim and vigor that is expected of our councillor and our elected politicians. So, Reg, on behalf of everyone here, we'd like to, if you'd rise and receive a welcome from the House.
The Honourable, the Member for Pictou Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas New Glasgow couple Carol and Henderson Paris have received one of the Royal Canadian Legion's top honours, whereas the couple received medals for their commitment to the Legion's youth track and field program after announcing their retirement earlier this year, and whereas Carol and Henderson spent 20 years as head chaperones for all of Canada and enjoyed the privilege of watching some 6,000 young athletes pass through the program and mature, some of them into Olympians. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House send congratulations to Carol and Henderson Paris as they mark a milestone for not only themselves and thousands of young Canadian athletes, but for the Royal Canadian Legion and its excellent program for youth. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you. May I be permitted to do an introduction, Mr. Speaker?
Please do.
Thank you. I bring the members' attention to the East Gallery, where I have three of my greatest supporters, I believe. West Gallery, I have my wife Penny, my daughter Taylor, and my son Jacob. If they want to stand, receive the warm welcome to the House. And I don't know who's sitting with them there, but I'll get security to escort them out of there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please.
I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the community of Upper Sackville hosted the second annual We're Rocking concert featuring Lower Sackville's own Under the Sun, Halifax John Malone, Haywire from Prince Edward Island, and the concert headliner Chilliwack. And whereas over 800 concert goers enjoyed an enjoyable and safe night with the help of sponsorship from the local businesses and organizations. And whereas, without the unwavering commitment of community volunteers in conjunction with the Springfield Lake Recreation Association to make this year's event a great success, therefore be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the organizing committee, sponsors, and local communities for making the second annual We're Rocking concert a success. Mr. Speaker, I request a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. But once again, this Conservative government has proven that they are oblivious to the current economic conditions and the need for made in Nova Scotia jobs. And whereas during a recent meeting of the Standing Committee on Resources, the Minister of Immigration, the Minister of Health Promotion, and the MLA for Pictou Centre voted against keeping Coast Guard ships and jobs that they have created in our province.
Order, please. The honourable member for Preston has the floor.
Whereas the government lacks the action on this matter, they have a negative impact on Nova Scotia's economy and with a loss of approximately $12 million annually. Therefore, be resolved that the Premier and his Cabinet refrain from the recent practice of encouraging the loss of well-paying jobs for Nova Scotians. And I'd ask for waiver.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable the member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in August of this year, the communities on the Iona Peninsula celebrated 50 years of schooling. And whereas what was once a small one-room schoolhouse was replaced in January of 1958 with Rankin Memorial School, and whereas the school served children of all ages from communities in central Cape Breton, covering grades primary to grade 12, and in January of 2007, the Rankin School of the Narrows opened its doors to a new generation of school children in the area. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House send congratulations to the Rankin Memorial School communities for celebrating more than 50 years of excellent rural education in Cape Breton. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Vince Calderhead, a senior staff lawyer...
Order, please.
Calderhead, a senior staff lawyer with Nova Scotia Legal Aid, has worked for Legal Aid on behalf of Nova Scotians facing legal challenges for 21 years. And whereas Vince Calderhead is well known for his dedicated efforts in the areas of poverty law and human rights, both professionally and as a committed citizen advocate. And whereas Vince Calderhead has been chosen as winner of the Canadian Bar Association's 2008 John Tate Award of Excellence, which is awarded annually to recognize an outstanding Canadian public sector lawyer. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulate Vince Calderhead on receiving the 2008 John Tate Award of Excellence, express their appreciation of his past work, and hope that he will continue to work through the legal system on behalf of Nova Scotians for many years to come. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the member for Richmond.
Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas each year the Halifax Chamber of Commerce recognizes the importance of workplace health in the business community through the presentation of their Healthy Business Awards. Whereas to qualify for this award, a business must demonstrate their leadership and commitment to having a healthy workplace. Whereas this year's recipients include Boyne Clark Barristers and Solicitors, CIBC, Maritime Forces Atlantic, Medavie Blue Cross, Office Interiors, and Secunda Marine. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly recognize the efforts of the winners of the Healthy Business Awards, and may we continue to encourage all businesses to follow these important workplace principles. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the member for Pictou Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Corporal Arthur Landry of Trenton was recently reunited with his family. Whereas Corporal Landry recently returned home from Afghanistan after spending 6 months working as an Air Force mechanic at Camp Nathan Smith in Kandahar, a trip he volunteered to make. Whereas Corporal Landry is a fine example of the talented expertise and courage that the Canadian military display. And 8 months of training and 6 months in service was a long time to be away from his young family, but Landry kept in constant communication through the internet and is now happy to be home. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House welcome Corporal Arthur Landry home from Afghanistan, where his expertise was essential to securing the safety of our troops serving in the region. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas more than 6 million Canadians live with chronic pain caused by various diseases or disorders, and whereas people who suffer from chronic pain are too often stigmatized and marginalized, and whereas more research is needed to improve knowledge of pain mechanisms and evaluation of different approaches to treatment. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly recognize that November the 2nd to the 8th has been proclaimed as Pain Awareness Week in the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Glace Bay Daredevils went undefeated in the Cape Breton Soccer League 10 and under division, and whereas the Glace Bay Daredevils had a season record of 20-0, and whereas they achieved this record under the guidance and coaching of Michael Cossack and Michael Cochran, therefore be it resolved the members of the House of Assembly congratulate the players and coaches of the Glace Bay Daredevils on a very successful season. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day to move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Sunday, October 25th, 2008, the Wedgeport Tuna Museum welcomed approximately 40 people of Acadian Métis heritage who gathered to honor a local community educator, historian, activist, and pioneer of French Acadian Métis groups in Southwest Nova Scotia. And whereas Roland Surrett has been a very passionate in his genealogical...
Order, please. The chatter is getting too high. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Whereas Roland Surrett has been very passionate in his genealogical and historical research related to the Acadian Métis movement, giving many talks on the radio, schools, and assemblies to promote and educate people about their heritage and wrote a book entitled Métis Acadian Heritage 1604 to 2004, which was published in 2004 and recognized around the country as a valuable reference on their history. And whereas he was presented with a bust of his likeness that was presented to the Métis groups of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, being housed at the Toonie Museum, and it was my honor to present him with a certificate on behalf of the province of Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House join me in congratulating Roland Surrett for his devotion, dedication, and contribution to the Acadian Métis movements in southwestern Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the residents of the community of Petite Riviere were devastated when a fire destroyed the landmark Covey Island Boat Works in August of this year, a business well known for building award-winning yachts since 1979. And whereas a few short days later, Edwin Sperry, a well-respected community member, owner of Sperry Electrical and longtime church and fire department volunteer, went missing, and later his body was found and brought home to a grieving family and community.
Order, please.
And whereas through those most difficult times, the residents of Petite Riviere, Lunenburg, and communities throughout Queens supported one another and demonstrated what it means to be family and community. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly recognize and thank the fire departments, ladies auxiliary, ground search and rescue teams, and many more volunteers who provided food and comfort during the Covey Island Boat Works fire and search for Edwin Sperry in August of this year. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Excuse me. Whereas the price of lobsters has dropped significantly in the recent weeks because of the economic turmoil in the marketplace, and whereas for many residents of southwest Nova Scotia, lobster fishing is how they earn their entire living, and whereas at lobster's current selling price, these fishermen will barely cover the cost, forgetting the idea of turning a profit this season. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture commit to help guide lobster fishermen through this time of economic turmoil. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the Minister of Labour and Workforce Development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas LRB Fabricators Limited of Port Williams is now one, if not the best manufacturer of fire trucks anywhere in Canada, and whereas LRB President Louis Benedict, a former fire chief in Port Williams, began fabricating fire trucks 26 years ago, and his company is now the only company in Nova Scotia which can fabricate new and rebuilt fire department pumpers, tankers, and mini tankers. And whereas this past summer, Louis Benedict's company achieved Underwriters Laboratory of Canada certification, with ULC being the only laboratory accredited by the Standards Council of Canada for the testing of firefighting equipment. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House of Assembly recognize the significance of LRB's accomplishment with ULC and extend our sincerest best wishes to Company President Louis Benedict and his wife, Secretary and Treasurer Debbie Benedict. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable, the member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas mother and daughter, Moninska Jean Augustine McIsaac and Doe I Nibby Melissa Sue Labrador, were recently the featured artists in a Mi'kmaq art show from stone to canvas in Liverpool at Adja Studio and Gallery. And whereas the artwork of Jean and Melissa has always been inspired by the petroglyphs, images incised on slate rocks along the shores of Kejimkujik Lake by the Mi'kmaq ancestors. And whereas From Stone to Canvas exhibit was so important to the artists and the community of Queens during Mi'kmaq History Month that Her Honour the Honourable Mayanne E. Francis, Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia, was in attendance for the opening to celebrate with them. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly recognize and congratulate artists Jean Augustine McIsaac and Melissa Sue Labrador, along with Adja Studio and Gallery, for showing From Stone to Canvas during Mi'kmaq History Month. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Amos Bud Ewing and his wife Lillian exemplify the best in citizenship, volunteerism, and community leadership, and whereas Mr. Ewing has dedicated 60 years to the Waterville and District Fire Department, playing a significant role in the development of a province-wide reputation for providing exemplary service to the community, and whereas Bud Ewing continues his commitment to the community through his hard work to ensure the Waterville and District Fire Department remain strong, therefore be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Bud on 60 years of service to the Waterville and District Fire Department and wish him and Lillian continued good health. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas recently Hebville Academy of Lunenburg County won the provincial banner in track and field, and whereas this is their 6th junior high banner in 7 years, and whereas this is a result of hard work, dedication, and commitment to their individual sport. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly extend congratulations to member Tyler Weil of Hebville Academy's track and field team and wish him well in his future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Honourable the member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Candace Slonwhite of Terrence Bay has graduated from the RCMP Training Academy in Regina, and whereas Constable Slonwhite has received her first posting to British Columbia, whereas the community celebrated with Candace at the Terrence Bay Fire Hall on Sunday, August 31st, 2008, therefore let it be resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Candace Slonwhite with wishes of a great future as an RCMP officer. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a recent outlook from the Atlantic Provinces Economic Council projected that our regional economy is slowing at a rapid pace, and whereas this is in sharp contrast to the Premier's view that we are 6 to 8 months away from an economic downturn, and whereas in these uncertain economic times, it is incumbent on the Premier to be completely upfront with Nova Scotians on what they can expect in the immediate future, therefore be it resolved that the Premier provide this House with an immediate economic update to show exactly what kind of shape our province's finances are in. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable the Minister of Justice. Are you doing a resolution? No. Okay. Sorry. The Honourable the member for Shelburne.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on October the 29th, 08, the Department of Fisheries and Ocean presented changes entitled Instructions to the Area Licensed Staff for the Maritime Region to the LFA 34 Advisory Committee. And whereas, according to DFO, these new instructions outline 3 options that may be used for lobster fishermen in the upcoming season as a mechanism to allow fishermen to reduce costs. And whereas the fishermen and their representative and LFA 34 are appalled that this decision that has the potential damaging the independence of the inshore lobster fisheries was made without any consultation with the LAF 34 Advisory Committee. Therefore, be it resolved that the House requests that the Provincial Minister of Fisheries to immediately write his federal counterpart calling for a meeting including all stakeholders to include that any changes made to the license reflected the best interest of the lobster industry in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable the Member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Barry McMillan worked diligently over a 19-year period.
Order. The chatter is raising again. The Honourable the Member for Pictou East.
Whereas Barry McMillan worked diligently over a 19-year period to advocate for small business as the Executive Director of the Pictou County Chamber of Commerce, and whereas Mr. McMillan was responsible for the expansion of the Chamber membership from 50 to over 300 businesses in Pictou County, and whereas Barry McMillan is now the newly elected Mayor of New Glasgow and brings to the position a wealth of business and community development skills, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature commend New Glasgow Mayor Barry McMillan for his years of dedicated service to the Pictou County business community and wish him well in his position as mayor. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 12 Wing Shearwater was established in 1918 by the Canadian government in collaboration with the United States Navy to protect the convoy sea approaches to Halifax during World War I, and whereas Shearwater played a vital role in the Battle of the Atlantic, anti-submarine warfare, and flying operations support during the Cold War era, and whereas today 12 Wing Shearwater continues to support NATO operations and the war on terrorism, specifically with the use of the Sea King helicopters, and is celebrating 90 years of service in Canada, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly extends sincere congratulations to 12 Wing Shearwater on the occasion of their 90th anniversary of serving Canada. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable the Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sunday, November the 2nd, 2008, the Cape Breton University Capers women's soccer team captured its 4th consecutive Atlantic University Sports Championship, defeating
Order. We need to hear this. The Honourable Member from Cape Breton Nova.
I'll start again, Mr. Speaker. Whereas on Sunday, November the 2nd, 2008, the Cape Breton University Capers women's soccer team captured its 4th consecutive Atlantic University Sport Championship, defeating the Dalhousie Tigers. And whereas the Capers have now won this title 5 of the last 6 years. Whereas Christina Weatherby was named Most Valuable Player, while goalkeeper extraordinaire Jessica McDermott posted her 2nd shutout of the tournament. Therefore, be it resolved, the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the Cape Breton University Caper women's soccer team and wish them all the best at the National Championship being held at Trinity Western University in Langley, BC. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Shelburne.
I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a community fundraiser was held in Lawport, Shelburne County in honor of Lonnie Townsend, who was seriously injured in a motor vehicle accident on June the 2nd, 2008, and following months of rehabilitation is now on the road to recovery. And whereas for many years Lonnie contributed personally and professionally to the community, where he worked as a reporter, photographer, and editor of the local newspaper, before moving on to radio CKBW as the voice of the South Shore for more than 20 years. And whereas Lonnie has been a member of Shepherd's Joy, a gospel quartet, since 2008, performing in area churches, schools, events, public fundraisers, and variety show. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate the community of Lockport for hosting a fundraising event on August 13, 2008, in honor of Lonnie Townsend, an outstanding member of the community who, through determination and hard work, is now on the road to recover. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Against? Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Hair for Heroes program raises funds to support the Daniel McClellan Memorial Fund to assist children in Atlantic Canada with leukemia, and whereas this event involves people growing their hair to a length that can be cut off to make a wig for children who have lost their hair due to illness, and whereas Ruth Tinker and her daughter Stacy both participated in the event, donating their hair, raising money to help others who are in need, therefore be it resolved that this House, Nova Scotia House of Assembly, commend Ruth and Stacy Tinker for their selfless sacrifice of hair for the Hair for Heroes. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? Motion is carried. Orders of the day. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Just thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will you please call to the order of business public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, will you please call Bill number 179, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter?
Bill 179, the Halifax Regional Municipal Charter. Honourable the Minister of Agriculture.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to rise and say a few words on this very important piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to begin by saying that the Halifax Regional Municipality is a very broad expanse of geography. And in the eastern part of Halifax County, we are very appreciative and somewhat dependent upon our resource-based sectors. And Mr. Speaker, it doesn't matter if you're out on the eastern shore and doing some fishing, or you happen to be in the Musquodoboit Valley mowing hay. We really do appreciate how diverse the Halifax Regional Municipality is. And Mr. Speaker, in 1991, I had the profound privilege of being elected as a Halifax County Councillor in the then old Halifax County municipality. And Mr. Speaker, it certainly was an eye-opener for me as a municipal councillor to represent District 12, which essentially was the Musquodoboit Valley. and some other communities in close proximity. When I spoke earlier, Mr. Speaker, in fact, just as I rose today, I mentioned the resource-based sector, but I would like to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that as well as fishing and farming, forestry and mining are very, very important too. And they're really main staples in our community. In fact, there is some debate from time to time as to whether or not National Gypsum, that huge quarry, resides in Halifax County or Hants County. And I know the MLAs from Hants County would like to put forward that, in fact, National Gypsum's quarry resides in Hants County, because we always like bragging rights regarding jobs and office space and things of that nature. But the fact of the matter is, if you were to fly overhead, you would see that nearly all of the quarry resides in Halifax County. And hence, sometimes that when people suggest that it's over in Milford or in Hants County, it's not really telling the full picture. So anyway, the honourable member for Hants East and I have had this discussion, and quite frankly, he does agree from time to time. Now, so mining, forestry, fishing, and farming, besides, you know, the jobs, the manufacturing sector and development that's taking place in Halifax proper, so to speak, has this great combination. And when you put it all together, the great combination makes Halifax Regional Municipality, Mr. Speaker. And I did want to bring just those points forward, that we're very proud of the resource-based sector, and the fact that jobs in the rural parts of Halifax Regional Municipality are extremely valuable, and we're very concerned that we work hard to enhance the development of these jobs and bring more jobs to the rural parts of Halifax County, because it is very, very important. And I know the Minister of Natural Resources would concur when I articulate here that the mining sector provides good paying jobs, and they have to deal with many, many challenges. And of course, with the downturn, so to speak, in the economy, the mining community has to be very, very resourceful. And I know in my riding, like I mentioned a little earlier on, we have National Gypsum, which employs upwards of 150 people at the quarry in Carroll's Corner Dutch Settlement, but as well we also have in Gaze River a lead zinc mine, and it's the only metal producing mine in Nova Scotia at this particular time. But the price of lead and zinc, of course, has gone down considerably over the last few weeks, and it is a reason of concern. So, Mr. Speaker, the men and women that work in Halifax County in the resource-based sector really appreciate those jobs, and they're not necessarily jobs that you would find, so to speak, in downtown Halifax. These jobs are of high skill. Some of these jobs require professionals in the administrative, in an administrative capacity. There's other professionals doing geology work, and it's a real combination of professionals and skills and trades and of course some labor positions. But very important to the mixture of Halifax Regional Municipality is the resource-based sector. Now, Mr. Speaker, back in 1991, when I was first elected, I had the opportunity to serve on council with 25 of my colleagues, men and women that were extremely very dedicated to municipal politics and working hard on behalf of local government to make Halifax County a very important, industrious, prosperous community, or communities. And I know a number of my colleagues in the legislature here today have served either on Halifax County Council or at the Halifax Regional Municipality level as well. And I think perhaps I see Councillor Reg Rankin in the gallery, and I know I served for a couple of years with Reg. Reg has been around quite some time, and works, as was indicated earlier, when the Minister of Immigration introduced, Reg mentioned that Reg is a hard worker and brings forward concerns, not only on behalf of his own district, but he always did. Reg brings forward the concerns of all of Halifax County, and of course now, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Halifax Region Municipality. And I believe that Reg is a councillor with a vision and is trying to make Halifax Region Municipality work. And I think a number of councillors are trying on that front. It isn't always easy, Mr. Speaker, because the municipality is so diverse. It's so diverse, and we do have situations from time to time where folks in the rural areas or in the suburban areas expect to receive the same level of services that downtown Halifax receives, and in some cases we can easily discern that they're paying a tax rate that is somewhat comparable, so I think it's very reasonable for constituents to have those expectations. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that this unit is so large that we have to respect that from time to time there is going to be differences. There is going to be differences, and there is going to be challenges. And I know my own community in Middle Musquodoboit, in the Musquodoboit Valley, a few years back, there was a meeting held regarding a potential succession to another municipal unit, and at the end of the day, that didn't materialize, Mr. Speaker. And I think at that time we were certainly willing to give the amalgamated municipality the benefit of the doubt and see if we can make this thing work. I believe it can work. I believe it is working, but it certainly takes everybody to be pulling in the same direction. And when you have interests that are so diverse, reaching a consensus isn't always that easy. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the Halifax Regional Councillors for the work and effort that they put into their jobs to make the Halifax Regional Municipality work. Now, the government of the day that brought forward amalgamation, of course, faced a lot of opposition, and as well they received some encouragement to move forward with this amalgamation. Halifax, Dartmouth, Bedford, and the county became an entity, and I believe we are the largest municipality east of Montreal. I'm not quite sure of that, but my colleague from Preston hasn't acknowledged that, or he hasn't. He is, yes, he is. He's also a gentleman that served on the Halifax Region Municipality for a term, I believe. I don't know if he's 2 terms. Okay, 2 terms. Well, anyway. But, Mr. Speaker, the point I want to make is that we have to appreciate that from time to time there is going to be differences. And I think as long as we recognize that, there will be opportunities to find consensus. We were quite concerned just a few short months ago when, in fact, a lady in the city had some chickens. She had, I think, 3 chickens in downtown Halifax. And, the young lady, I believe she was a university student, was in fact, collecting the eggs. And she was treating these chickens, which are really farm animals, as pets, but they were providing her with eggs, and in fact, it's pretty hard to argue against that. But Mr. Speaker, the point I want to make is that in the rural parts of Halifax Regional Municipality as well, people are concerned about that and watching that. And I believe long as our representatives recognize that we have to try to find the balance between the urban and the rural communities, then we can go forward and the big entity can sustain and in fact can be prosperous. So, we can make light of those types of issues, whether it's a horse in downtown Halifax or whether it's a chicken or whether it's cats or dogs or what have you, chimpanzees. Mr. Speaker, you have to find the balance. And, as well, I know, in fact, this evening the Halifax East Hants Federation of Agriculture is holding a meeting out in Shubenacadie, I believe it is, and one of the issues they're going to discuss this evening is the product that Enviro processes out at the Aerotech Park, which is really the Harbor Solution product that is processed and manufactured into fertilizer. And from all the reports that I have received, this fertilizer, which has been approved by the Minister of Environment, is doing a real heck of a job, Mr. Speaker. And again, it provides a fertilizer to the agriculture community at the current time. And the nutrient value of that fertilizer is very, very phenomenal, actually. It's absolutely providing a type of fertilizer with a nutrient value that when you do a dollar comparison to your conventional fertilizer, actually the fertilizer is much cheaper and is providing an extremely good benefit to the farming community. So we're very pleased that the Fertilizer Act has approved the product. The Department of Environments, federally and provincially, have approved the product, and I think in the spirit of cooperation we can move forward on that front as well, Mr. Speaker. So anyway, this piece of legislation, Bill 179, is an important piece of legislation. I want to commend the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations for bringing forward the legislation. I know that he made a commitment, and he's a gentleman that stands behind the commitments and the promises that he makes. And this piece of legislation, I think, will go a long way to enhance and sustain the Halifax Region Municipality. I do support it, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to, on behalf of that minister, close debate for second reading on the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, and I so move.
Thank you. The motion is for second reading on Bill number 179, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion is carried.
Bill number 179, an act respecting the Halifax Regional Municipality.
Or that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 181, the Halifax Regional Municipality Act.
Bill number 181 for second reading, the Halifax Regional Municipality Act. Any interveners? Yes? Yes? Chair recognizes the honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased today to rise to speak to Bill 181, Mr. Speaker, an act to implement HRM by design. I want to start out by saying, and really I'm stealing a quote from a recent publication from the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, and I think that we'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who doesn't agree with this, that Halifax is a great place and has a great future. That's what this is about. That's what we're here to protect, to work for, to create good policy that will help move and help the municipality manage the decisions that they're legally mandated to do. Halifax Regional Council, Mr. Speaker, began this process for HRM by design more than a year ago. In fact, it was while I was still on council, perhaps my honourable colleague across the House was as well. I don't think there were too many more that were at that time. But it's a process that engaged the community. It's a process that engaged the citizens that they were elected to speak to hear from, to consult, Mr. Speaker. These meetings were well attended. The public was thoroughly engaged, Mr. Speaker. A wide range of stakeholders, in fact, were engaged and consulted. The focus at the times, this was brought in through stages, the focus was on developing an urban design strategy for the regional centre. The regional centre includes Halifax, a section of Halifax Peninsula, part of the Dartmouth area, up to and including sections of the Highway 111 circumferential highway. The goals that, Mr. Speaker, of the HRM by design process was to create vision with design principles for planning, for creating opportunity for business here in the downtown, for developing a great place to visit, work, and be productive, a framework to work from, a reurbanization strategy, Mr. Speaker. It was careful, one of the key elements was that it was careful to balance development, contemporary architecture with its heritage assets. We all know too well how important our heritage aspects are in the downtown area, and this process attempted to engage that element, to thoroughly consider all the aspects that needed to balance that contemporary design with heritage. As I spoke before, Mr. Speaker, this was not an all-inclusive, all one-shot day deal. This came through council in stages. Back in February of 2008, a resolution came forward from Halifax Regional Council, endorsed by Halifax Regional Council unanimously, that asking for the minister to deal with this. The minister then took steps to bring it forward to us in the spring of the House sitting in the spring. But unfortunately, that's where it ended. It should have perhaps come forward. There is some speculation that perhaps some of the incidents of recent downtown issues would have perhaps not happened had that come forward. And I think that the responsibility of that should lie squarely on the minister in that department for that failure to bring it forward at the time that it should have. The resolution is as an outcome, Mr. Speaker, of a plan, a 25-year regional plan that I'm proud to say I took some part in approving while on council. This HRM by design really is an element that is the next step. And we have an interest of moving that forward, Mr. Speaker, of dealing with it. I want to take a moment, though, before I move into some of the issues that we look forward to hearing more about, to congratulate and commend the citizens of HRM. We stand in this House and we often celebrate, brag, talk about consultation and engagement. We talk about democratic processes, that we need people to be involved, be engaged citizens, be responsible citizens. Come out and have your say so you can affect the decisions that are being put forward by your councillor, by your MLA, by your MP in the respective houses that they are part of the decision-making process. And the citizens of HRM did that. I want to thank and congratulate Council, Halifax Regional Council, and all the members of it that continue to move that forward, and certainly the planning team that were involved in making that happen. It does require a lot of energy, it requires a lot of commitment and effort, and their vision is to be congratulated. They did attempt to have a fully engaged citizens. I believe they did that. Certainly, we encourage citizens of HRM and all across Nova Scotia to continue to be involved in these opportunities. If they stay at home and they don't go to the meetings, it's difficult then to change it later. After such a process, Mr. Speaker, after taking the time, it's now time to take action. It's time to take action. The municipality wants to move forward with this consideration. There are stakeholders around the area that have publicly endorsed it. There's a clear message from the public, though, Mr. Speaker, that's worth noting. I want on the record that, and certainly recent incidents down in the downtown, clear evidence that the current planning process, the decision-making process, the strategies that are in place are somewhat gray. They need fixing. The municipality has recognized that. The citizens have recognized that. So it's now our turn to create policy to help move that along and to fix these problems. If I could borrow a quote of an earlier caucus meeting from a colleague, the status quo is not okay. So we're glad to see this come forward. We're glad to see it here in the chamber. Again, we're sorry it wasn't here in the spring. but it's worth, I think it needs to be talked about. It needs to be very, very clear to everyone in this House, every decision maker that is weighing in on this, every stakeholder, every citizen, that the legislation that we pass here in this House is enabling legislation. We have concerns about it, but it's not an endorsement of the details of HRM by design. That is the responsibility of HRM Council. That's where it should be. That's where the consultation took place. The legislation that moves forward in this chamber is meant to be the tool by which they can move forward with that process. What's being presented at this time, we in our caucus, we see this as somewhat problematic, Mr. Speaker. And I've spoken about the real benefit, the reality of public consultation, the need for it, the rights of the citizens to have it. This legislation, the way it's being proposed at this point, deteriorates that consultation, Mr. Speaker. There's an opportunity to move public consultation, to move the rights of the citizens to weigh in on what's going on in their communities, in their neighbourhoods, away from an elected body, away from council, into the hands of an advisory board. And because our HRM has done such a terrific job, such a full scope of consultation on this design, to now have that type of responsibility moved away from them, we find that difficult to support. But we do look forward to moving it into law amendments and having more representation, hear more about it, have more meetings. Currently, Mr. Speaker, planning applications that come before the staff, and now some are considered by council, elected representatives who are taking the time to become informed on the issues that are on the table through consultation with their residents, their citizens. They consult the public, they make a decision. If that decision is disagreed with, there is a public right to appeal, and that appeal would go to the Public Utilities Board. That's what's now happening. The recommendation to move that away from that public scrutiny, from that watchful eye, the watchful eye of the public, away from the considerations of the public interest, the public officials that they have elected. We struggle with that. They have been elected to put their interests first, as have we. And this legislation, as it stands right now, is undermining that role. It's been suggested, Mr. Speaker, that timelines, tightening timelines, shortening timelines, simplifying process is what's right. But making it simple and shorter doesn't always equal to what is right. It doesn't necessarily equate to good policy. Mr. Speaker, our caucus is prepared to move this into law amendments. We need to move this issue forward, but in a constructive way, in a thoughtful, engaged way. To be clear again, the policies that we'll set here are not an endorsement of the detail of HRM by design. Again, I need to stress that is a council decision. That is a Halifax Regional Municipality Council decision. That is that's their mandate, not ours. It's where it should be. The role of the citizen will continue in their hands, Mr. Speaker. I understand that the HRM by design process will go back to public hearing in 2009 sometime. Early spring is my understanding. But we have to get it right now. What will it take to help protect and assure that a municipality can do what they need to do in a constructive way, but the right way? So with that, Mr. Speaker, we'll move this into law amendments. I look forward to hearing from the stakeholders, the interested parties. We'll move it for consideration in that process, the democratic process, as I've spoke of before. We respect that process, Mr. Speaker. That's what this is about. We respect and support the next step. So I look forward to hearing that representation, and with that, I'll take my seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Before the chair recognizes the next speaker, I would like to recognize the honourable member from Timberley Prospect on an introduction, please.
I thank the member from Halifax Clayton Park for permitting this introduction. Mr. Speaker, in the West Gallery tonight we have some young men from my community from the First Five Island Scouts, and with them are a number of adults who are leaders and members of our community. I'm going to ask them to stand in a moment, and I'd like to recognize the leaders: Christine Medill, Terry Davidson, Mike Voigt, Chris and Amy Covey, and Sheila Fitzpatrick. Mr. Speaker, First Five Island Scouts, could you stand and receive a warm welcome from our house?
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the honourable member from Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's my pleasure to rise today and speak on second reading on Bill 181, which is the HRM by Design bill. This bill has taken on a number of steps really at the municipal level before it even came to us. It's certainly been in the works since the summer of 2006. And it is a part of the big regional plan which was brought forward in the last number of years through HRM. And in fact, having a regional plan for our municipality has been an important thing to do and has resulted in some vision for each part of the municipality, which has been very important. I know I participated in some of those early discussions, Mr. Speaker, as the MLA for the area, but also as the previous councillor for District 16, which is Halifax Clayton. It's Halifax Clayton Park is the riding. The district covered Clayton Park, Rockingham, and Princess Lodge. So, in fact, a growing area, Mr. Speaker, that has now been broken into 2 council districts because of the large population and the growth that we were experiencing. And as part of the regional plan, Mr. Speaker, that from whence this has come, we did as well identify regional parks and special areas. And that was, members of this House will remember the Birch Cove, Blue Mountain area, Birch Cove Lakes and Blue Mountain area, which has now been designated by the city as a regional urban park area and endorsed here by the legislature as well, or through the Minister of Environment. So it will now be a wilderness protected area, and that coincided with efforts at the municipal level as well as the provincial. And so I'm very pleased with that, and I saw the whole regional planning exercise as one that engaged people from one end of the municipality to the other. There were workshops and meetings and a lot of really meaningful consultation. And again, from all the work done on the regional plan, we have here the Regional Center's Urban Design Study, which came from that, and the municipalities request that our province provide the enabling legislation to move forward. So the province had, or the municipality had several requests of the province that we give them the power to move forward with HRM by design. And certainly there's a great deal to what's being suggested in this bill. Primarily, we're looking at quite a shift in the way that developments and changes in the municipality would be handled. And it is, in many ways, it will cut into the powers of our councillors that are elected. We've only recently had a very dynamic election in HRM to see a new council elected, and they will be sworn in tomorrow night, Mr. Speaker, in the Clayton Park riding, I might add, in a new theatre out there. But again, we have a council that's very interested in reaching out and engaging all corners of the very large municipality, bearing in mind that HRM is larger than Prince Edward Island and has more people as well. So it is a challenge to govern. And by passing some of the suggestions in Bill 181, the council will actually be taking many of the development decisions away from council and setting it up in a separate forum. It will allow HRM Council to appoint a design review committee, and that committee would approve architectural design and other characteristics of any new development. And again, this bill is specific to the downtown core. It won't affect developments, for example, in my area of Clayton Park or in Fairview or off the peninsula. But it certainly has a defined area in downtown Halifax and in the Dartmouth side that will be governed by these rules that would be set out by the municipal council and allow them to be then more arm's length. And that could be good in terms of the fact that it could be more responsive, perhaps it could expedite some of the applications, but it also means there's a little, I would say, a decrease in accountability because you haven't got your counselors directly involved in each of these applications that are going to be coming through. On the plus side, the bill does provide for clarity of the rules, and we've seen a lot of impatience, Mr. Speaker, and frustration, and not only with the development community themselves, but with the public in HRM. And I've heard it in my riding as well, where people are anxious that we be a city that is open to development and open to growth, embracing change, and at the same time respecting our heritage and particularly our built heritage, which is what we were talking about here tonight. But there is a conflict between the two, and I think most people in Metro would like to see a respect for heritage at the same time as we make room and accommodate growth. And so there has to be a meeting of the minds. There has to be a compromise that is determined so that we can accomplish both those very important aims. Again, HRM is the economic driver for the province. We know that more than 50% of the economic activity happens here in the metro area. And that is not to say there's not a lot of important manufacturing and industry right across the province, which there are, but with 40% of the population and with many jobs in public service and financial sector, in the military, HRM has got 50% of the economic activity. And so we have to accommodate that, and we have to make allowances that are going to see that we can continue to grow those. We can never take anything for granted, Mr. Speaker. If you accept that things are going to just remain as they are today, you can be sure that we will be losing ground in terms of growing our economy and securing our children's future. So we know that we have to remain alert and remain open-minded as we go forward. But we are very conscious as well of some of the changes that will if adopted exactly as is, will take away some of the powers that the Municipal Council has, apparently with their wishes are to do that. But it's still a little bit troublesome. I note in one of the reports from HRM to their councillors, one of their council reports, it's from February 3rd of 2007, they indicate what the goals are of declaring the study area, the downtown study area for the urban design study, and these are very laudable things. They're talking about, and I think this is first and foremost, clear, predictable, and expedited development processes. And that's really responding to the fact that a lot of developers claim that it's difficult to anticipate what will or will not be accepted by the council. And they're trying very earnestly to do just that. If they own property, if they're working together to develop a site, they are trying to find that compromise that I referred to about just finding the right balance between the height, the density, the setbacks, the aesthetic details of the projects that they are proposing. And it's hard for them to do that if the rules are not clear and predictable. And that costs a lot of money when you have to go back through appeal or you have to hire experts to justify different aspects of the development. If the rules were clearer, Mr. Speaker, if they were laid out and predictable, that would help developers, and it would clarify a lot of the misunderstandings I think that we've seen very publicly played out in our municipality. And we don't want a reputation in Nova Scotia or in HRM of being slow to respond or being slow to adopt progress and change. I think that right across the country we're recognized for our heritage and for the character of our city. But at the same time, the newer buildings that we have, and I might add there are not too many new ones in downtown Halifax. I believe Purdy's Wharf is our last new large office complex. And that does date from before 80, I think it's 20 years old, 89 perhaps it was. It's been quite some time since we've had a new project for offices. So we want to make sure that we are also remaining the regional centre for all of Atlantic Canada, that we remain the financial and cultural centre for the Atlantic region as well. And we have to do that by providing the space and the cultural spaces and the public amenities that will support it. So the first goal, as I said, was the clear, predictable development processes. And I know that in the business community, the urban UDI, the Urban Development Institute, very much supports the HRM by design process because they believe it will lay out the parameters and lay out the rules so that they can be successful and work with the public and with the interest groups in HRM to build our city. There's also, as a second goal, in here articulated in the council report, is improved heritage protection. And I know that's very important to all of us, to all the members that represent HRM, but beyond that, to every member in the legislature, because we recognize that HRM is the capital of our province, and we have to have a respect for it for that reason, for its tourism appeal and the fact that the tours are drawn here, for the people that come here on the cruise ships looking for that unique experience that is Nova Scotia and Halifax and HRM. So we want to make sure that there's also the improved heritage protection. Now, according to the municipal report, they say that is the second in their list of goals. We have the introduction of design guidelines to ensure architectural excellence. And that's also important. We don't want to build buildings that are all the same or have no architectural merit. And we have tremendous architects that are here and practicing here in our province and right here in Halifax. And I would like to see us have the projects going forward that allow them to showcase their talents and their creativity. And I believe that they show a tremendous reflection of the values of our city when they do integrate heritage and heritage features into even newer buildings. And I think that that's very important too. So there's a recognition that we want to have fine development and architecturally pleasing development. And often when there are tremendous delays in projects, that can strip away the architectural perhaps uniqueness of some of the projects, because usually there's an extra cost to making them more, to making certain features built into them. And if a project is delayed significantly, often the cost to that becomes very great. We have to remember that every time months and even years go by without the opportunity to move on projects that are planned, it becomes very onerous on the developers. And I want to make it clear that I understand both sides of this equation. I have worked, Mr. Speaker, as a management consultant in Halifax and in the province, and worked with companies that have aims to improve our province. And if you have the funding set aside or the capital arranged for a large project, and it is delayed for a long time, that money is not working for you. In another city, you could perhaps have built that project that you had in mind, and it would be returning some dividends already, so you could begin repaying the capital you had borrowed and begin making some profit on the development and on the risk that the company's taken. And it should be remembered that development is not always lucrative. It is a risk. And we've seen times when our market has gone very badly, and companies that own property and own buildings and businesses can suffer losses. It's not always a guarantee that they're going to make money. And it's a concern that, again, that the risk has to be balanced. And that's why I say I become concerned when things are delayed, because often you're losing the nicer architectural features or uniqueness of some buildings because of the loss that the developers are looking at in terms of their financial commitments. So it's just a concern that way, that we balance those two needs. In this list, they also talk about sustainable development practices being encouraged through HRM by design. I think that all of us would agree that's the way to go in the future, that we look at things that are sustainable. As a design for the whole area that's being covered, this whole downtown area, Mr. Speaker, which is not just in Halifax, but also in Dartmouth, they're talking about walkable communities, transit-friendly neighborhoods, and again, that would be environmentally sensitive development. And I think we can all support that idea, because that is the way of the future for all municipalities. I think that's very important. well, these are the aims of HRM by design as the municipality is seeing it. That's right. We all want a vibrant and prosperous and beautiful downtown, Mr. Speaker, and that means we have to respect the heritage and balance it, as I said before. The ability to have more and more accessible and beautiful open spaces in the downtown is very important as well. And through HRM by design, I understand there will be incentives built into development that if there is better public spaces provided through the development proposal, or better affordable housing, maybe including affordable housing, and some other amenities, that there is then an aspect of bonusing which can be looked at. And that is not a bad thing in and of itself, Mr. Speaker, because if we don't provide incentives, we won't get some of the things that we as a community value, that we as individuals who live in the city value. We don't want to build the downtown only for expensive condominiums, for example. I'm sure that all the members of the House would agree with that we want to make sure that people of different income levels can live and work in downtown Halifax and Dartmouth, because there is a great quality of life to being close to your place of work and being able to walk and enjoy the cultural aspects of living in the downtown core. So that's important as well, that be improved. And I think building into the processes, again, more clarity around the bonusing and what might be allowed or not allowed is very important, because it also creates that incentive for developers to do some of the things that we want to see done. And I am particularly keen on the aspect of including affordable housing as we move forward. So a lot of it has to do with providing a framework, providing the parameters for growth in our city. And I know that there's a lot of demand that we put clarity around that. In the recent incident where council was split on a development downtown just nearby and very close to our historic properties, we see an issue really arise, Mr. Speaker, where because of the lack of clarity, operating under the current rules, our council is completely divided, and we find a project coming to a dead halt because of that split vote. And I think that it is important that we have rules in place that are going to guide the future, and we cannot have the provincial government stepping in as the Premier has suggested, and overruling council decisions, because we have an elected body, and that is the HRM Council, that should have the same respect as any other body that is elected in any municipality in this province. And if we start to move in and decide which projects we want to support and which ones we don't, or when the province should overrule a municipal decision, it really becomes a free-for-all. It becomes completely confused. We are undermining our municipal government by doing that, and we're not respecting the voters of HRM who have endorsed those candidates and elected that council. So I feel that we have to find rules that are going to be respected by all parties, and we can't be jumping into what are really municipal matters on a case-by-case basis. Every development is important, Mr. Speaker, in terms of its impact on jobs or its impact on providing housing and again, updating and modernizing our city when that occurs. They're all important, and all the proponents of those projects need to have respect, as do the council, in making their decision whether they're for or against them. And I don't believe we can pick and choose based on who our friends are or which project we think is more appealing. Again, going back to the architectural designs, if this bill is passed, then HRM would be in a position to create a committee that would actually look at those features and decide which characteristics are desirable or not. So I think that is going to be something up to the municipality to decide and lay out the ground rules for. As has been said already, Mr. Speaker, this is providing the enabling legislation. The details around what would be required or what the council would be comfortable in setting up in terms of that committee will be determined by the HRM Council. But I think we're in agreement with other members in the House that it is not right for the provincial government to jump in on a one-off basis. I think we're all in agreement on that. And that this is not the way to create a stable, clear environment for business to take place. And it also creates a lot of stress for the community, because the community have to have a way to be involved, and certainly it is difficult for them to always be vigilant and to be jumping into each and every application by having to come to public hearings and speak their mind each and every time. It seems like it's a very charged environment at the moment, and perhaps if the rules could be clearly articulated, I'm not sure they will be articulated to everyone's satisfaction, but if we have clear rules, it is an improvement, certainly, from the position we're in right now. It sometimes seems that developers will simply propose something to sort of see whether it will fly or not, how much opposition is out there, whether people in the community and in some of the special interest groups are paying attention or not. And so there's a sense of if you don't try, you won't get anything. So they sometimes ask for too much and perhaps ask for extra height. Again, as I said, I sat on council and saw projects like that being developed under the development agreement process, which was the rule for virtually all the land in the area I represent. That land isn't subject to zoning. It's being developed block by block. And the development agreement process also allows for a lot of amendment as it goes through. And certainly it was the job of the councillor to see when we felt that it wasn't in the public interest to have the extra height or the density of the building and various features of that nature that we could discuss. Even things like the aesthetics of the building, the outside, and the landscaping would often come up because those are very important to continuing the livable nature of our communities, making sure that they are pleasant to walk in, that they have connecting paths, that buildings are not built in isolation, and that sort of thing. So we felt that was very important. The bill is going to certainly, I think, attract some attention at law amendments, Mr. Speaker. Unquestionably, there are going to be people for and against various aspects of it. And I am certainly looking forward to participating in that discussion and hearing the official presentations that are going to come forward. I do stress again that as a forward-moving city, we have to remember if we're going to remain preeminent in Atlantic Canada, we have some work to do. Because our province has been slipping, quite honestly, in terms of our role in the Atlantic area, and I don't want to see that happen, and I want to see HRM remain the cultural and business center of our region. And I think this is not going to happen without us making efforts. We can't simply take it for granted. There's a great sense, I think, of complacency, that we've always been the major center, that we have the most universities, that we are, the financial capital, and we take it for granted that this is always going to remain the same. But you have only to look to New Brunswick or to Newfoundland to see there are councils there and there's provincial governments there that are dynamic, that are working hard to capture business, that want people to come and make it their home, and they're being, frankly, they're being very dynamic. And if we think we can rest on our laurels, we are wrong. And I hope that the members of the legislature feel that as well, because we have to, collectively work hard to make sure that the virtues and the values and the beauty of HRM are maintained, and that we do hold our place in Atlantic Canada so that we become the best place to live and to establish businesses and to remain after you study at our wonderful universities. Mr. Speaker, I came here myself to study at Dalhousie, and like many others who come back either because of family ties or academic excellence of our universities, a lot of people are drawn here from around the country. And if our city remains vibrant and remains forward-looking, those young people are going to want to stay, just as I did in this region and in this city. So, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to hearing from the various groups that I know will come to see us at law amendments. I'm sure that the Heritage Trust will be there. I've had the opportunity to speak to them on a number of occasions about some of the aspects of this bill and other bills, and even just in general terms about where we're going as a city and how to respect the heritage that we have right now and that we perhaps take for granted. How can we respect that at the same time as we move forward to ensure that our city can grow and that we do have the office space and the facilities there for the next generation of business that will come here. Do you want me to adjourn debate? Okay, very good. So, Mr. Speaker, I think I've articulated well the conflict and frustration that exists in the HRM, and that I hear from my constituents on a very regular basis. They want to see growth, and they want to see us moving forward. They're proud of Halifax, and they also understand that the heritage and uniqueness of our downtown core is something that we love to bring our visitors to see, that draws in the tourists from cruise ships and from all corners of the world. And so we're looking at a balance, and we're hoping that HRM, by design, Bill 181, will take us a step forward in acknowledging and respecting both aspects of HRM, Mr. Speaker. So with that, I would like to adjourn debate, and I look forward to hearing people at law amendments.
Thank you. The motion is to adjourn debate on Bill number 181. Is the House ready for the question? Question. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. That concludes the government's business for this day. However, before going into the hours for tomorrow, I would just note, Mr. Speaker, and seek to get some consensus from the House. As members would know, that there is a special ceremony recognizing the 90 years since the end of World War I, the Democracy 250, and that there is a ceremony at St. Paul's Church in Grand Parade that commences at 4:30. So what I would like to do first, Mr. Speaker, when we do the hours, is to seek approval to recess the House from 4:30 to 5:30 tomorrow for that period, to be able to go up and allow members to attend and show respect for that event.
Okay, the question that's before the House, the motion that's before the House, is for the House to recess tomorrow between the hours of 4:30 and 5:30. Is the House ready for the question? Oh, pardon me, the Government House Leader?
Just for clarity, Mr. Speaker, for all honour members, the hours that were discussed for tomorrow in that would have normally been from 2 to 6 p.m. That hour that we would be out of the House, we would come back and finish the business unless there was some concurrence on business. However, we would sit tomorrow at the hour of 2 p.m. and then look at our schedule as the day goes and allow enough time for question period in that block. Right. So after QP, that we would look at that point to recess whatever appropriate. Well, on the suggestions from across the floor, Mr. Speaker, can I just suggest, Mr. Speaker, that if it's recognized by the House that we may choose at 4:30 that we would either recess or finish our business for that day, we'll determine that tomorrow following our business, and I'll consult with the House leaders. But right now, the hours would be from 2 to 6. If we have a recess, we would continue our business for that period and deal with late debate as well, but we can consult tomorrow. With that, I would move we now rise.
The first motion that's before the House, order please. The first motion that's before the House is for the House to recess tomorrow afternoon between the hours of 4:30 and 5:30. So is the House ready for that question first? Question? Okay, all those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Against? Okay, motion carried. The Government House Leader.
So with that, Mr. Speaker, I move that we do now rise, meet again tomorrow at the hour of 2 p.m., and then subject to concurrence of the other members of the House through the House leaders, we'll determine the concluding hours. If need be to extend, we will.
Okay. So the motion that's before the House now is for the motion to adjourn this evening. So is the House ready for the question? Question. Okay. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Against? Motion carried. So the House will rise to sit again tomorrow at 2 p.m.